with Mr. Jakub Barnes. Sorry if I didn't pronounce very correctly your name. I hope you enjoy this, and please make this session a very interactive one. We will have around 20 minutes each for our presentation, if it's okay with you all. Thank you, and Professor Jakub, you have the floor.
Hello, my name is Jakub Barnes. I'm a professor at the Department of New Media and Business Journalism at the University of Economics in Katowice, in Poland. And today I will have a great pleasure to present you some research findings from my analysis, whose aim was to diagnose possibilities and limitations of online media as a digital agora, so a virtual space for citizens' deliberation, which could potentially strengthen and enhance democracy in Poland as well as other Central European countries. And the starting point for my analysis was the concept proposed by Jürgen Habermas, who indicated the key features of the public sphere, that is inclusiveness, equality, autonomy, legal guarantees, and rationality. And taking all of them into consideration, I have decided to focus my analysis on 4 problem areas. The first one included the impact of digital exclusion upon the availability of online communication platforms for citizens. The second one addressed the relations between the relative anonymity of online discourse and the equality and autonomy of citizens' deliberation on the internet. The third part of the study focused on rationality and interactivity of online discourse, and the last part of the analysis was focused on the legal regulations regarding the functioning of online media. And in my paper I have referred to all of these 4 dimensions of the digital public sphere, but today, during my short presentation, it's impossible to cover all of them, so I have decided to focus on the problem of the deliberative potential of online debates on public issues. And since the early 90s, many researchers try to diagnose to which extent online communication platforms can serve as a place for citizen deliberation on public issues. And one of the first of such studies was conducted by Steven Schneider, who analyzed the Talk Abortion discussion group, and his research indicated that the discussion was dominated by a small group of participants, with the activity of other interlocutors was rather episodic. So only 15 people, that was 0.5% of total number of contributors, was responsible for posting almost half of all comments. And the limitations of online discussion platforms as a place for citizen deliberation was also indicated by a study conducted by Anthony G. Wilhelm. It was an analysis of politic-oriented discussion groups. It has showed that the vast majority of the users was more interested in expressing their own views rather than listening to the opinions, arguments presented by their interlocutors. Less than 20% of the analyzed statements actually refer to the previous comments of other debaters. And the aim of my research was to verify to which extent the findings, these observations of the Western scholars, retain their validity in reference to the situation we have in Poland, so the Polish online discussion platforms. But in order to expand the previously applied research perspective, I have decided to conduct a comparative study of the online discussion devoted to national and local issues. And in the latter case, I have focused on online debates devoted to Łódź, which is the 3rd largest city in Poland. And my study covered the debates from one of the most popular Polish forums that is functioning within Gazeta.pl web portal. And the next stage of the selection of research material was passed by the discussion, whose topic could be qualified into one of 3 designated categories. It was development strategies, public finance, and transparent communication. And the most popular local and nationwide discussion was from with the accepted criterion being the number of the posts published within particular debate. And coming to the results, if we concentrate only on nationwide discussions, the results of my study suggest that we should be extremely careful when we are assessing the potential of online discussion forum as a platform of civil deliberation on important social issues. The first thing we should take into consideration is the fact that the study showed a very small level of rationality of analyzed nationwide debates, because nearly 1/3 of statements were not all related to the discussed issues, while only 1 in 9 comments contained a position related to the discussed issue and supported with any logical or factual argumentation. And at this point, I think it should be stressed out that the subject of my analysis didn't concern the validity of the position itself, nor the quality of arguments supporting it. Therefore, we should remember that a significant part of argumentation that was recorded during the study was correct from the formal point of view, but actually it had little to offer to ongoing debate, or it just repeated the points that were already mentioned before. And the fact that more extensive and insightful analysis of the discussed issues were very rare is also indicated by the fact that the average comment length was around 350 characters with spaces, which in Polish language is more or less 3 medium extended sentences. And another weakness of the scrutinized nationwide debates was the fact that they failed to expand the knowledge of the participants on discussed issues, because only 1.2% of the comments introduced some new facts, while only 1.5% of the statements introduced some, only 1.5% of comments referred to some kind of external sources of information. And the conducted analysis also has revealed that the scrutinized nationwide debates could be characterized by a very low level of interactivity, because less than 25% of comments contain any form of reference to posts of the other discutants. And the citizens' lack of interest into entering a real dialogue with other citizens could be also demonstrated by the fact that the vast majority of people participating in analyzed debates have shared their views only once. So in all of the analyzed nationwide debates, each of the discussants published on average less than 2 statements. And the citizens' short-lasting interest in participating in analyzed debates was also indicated by the fact of the rapid extinction of the latter, because actually nearly 3/4 of posts were published within first 24 hours of discussions. And the very short duration of the scrutinized debates, together with their low level of interactivity and rationality, considerably reduce the chance that interlocutors will actually revise their opinions on discussed issues. And not a single participant of the analyzed debates admitted during their course to have modified his or her position under the influence of some other disputant's statement. And it should be noted that another weakness of the scrutinized debates was that their very limited social range, because even the most popular nationwide debate, which was devoted to some kind of infrastructure, transport infrastructure, attracted only 243 people. This is around 0.0006% of the total population of Poland, which is roughly 38 million people. And one of the factors that could potentially discourage internet users from participating in analyzed debates could be the prevailing low level of cultural discussion. Although vulgarism occurred only in 3% of analyzed comments regarding alleged features of interlocutors or public officials occurred in 60% of analyzed statements. So we can say that argumentation ad personam was very popular. And this very critical assessment of the deliberative potential of online discussion platforms is, however, subject to a significant change if we are going to focus on discussions devoted to local problems. quality because their participants speak on topics related to the near social environment and thus and therefore better known to them. So the comments published during the analyzed local discussions were less often without any relation to the discussed problems that it was the case in nationwide debates. It was 17% versus 29%, and they were also 3 times more likely to include a position supported with any factual or rational argumentation. It was 33% versus 11%. And partially correct was also my assumption that the higher competence on the local debaters, participants in regard to the discussed issues, together with usually weaker ideological connotation of the latter, should also foster more interactive and more cultural discussion. Because although no essential difference in the prevailing cultural discussion between national and local discussions occurred, actually the latter were indeed characterized by a higher level of interactivity. Almost half of the posts published during the scrutinized local debates contain some kind of form form of a reference to other interlocutors' contributions, which was twice as many in case of the nationwide debates. And my study has also clearly shown that citizens are more likely, more willing to participate in discussions concerning local matters, because more frequently than in case of the nationwide debates, they touch on problems that directly affect their everyday existence. So the percentage of which residents who decided to vote their interest in analyzed local debates was a dozen times higher than the percentage of Poles that decided to participate in nationwide debates on analogical problems. And coming to conclusions, I believe that in the light of my survey, it's quite reasonable to argue that we shouldn't perceive the development of online communication platforms as some kind of a miraculous cure for the deficit of public debate in Central European countries. However, while analyzing the possibilities and limitation of the online media as digital public sphere, we should always refer their deliberative potential to the deliberative potential that is offered by other platforms of social communication functioning within a given community. So, for example, when we are considering the restriction in citizens' access to the digital agora, which in case of Poland result mainly from motivational and competence dimension of digital exclusion, we should remember that still online discussions attract more participants than the traditional ones. When we are talking about the issue that the online civic discourse is by no means free of the relation of power and domination, we should still remember that online discussions are still much more egalitarian and inclusive than the traditional public debates organized by some scientific, socio-cultural or political institutions. And finally, when we are criticizing the level of rationality and interactivity of online civil discourse, we cannot forget that the same restrictions, the same limitations apply in many Central European countries to another platforms of social dialogue, including the mass media discourse and parliamentary debate. And there's no denying that the vast majority of participants of online debates on public issues limit themselves to a spontaneous and often one-time expression of their arbitrary opinion. But in my opinion, this cannot be the reason to ignore the minority of the participants who are genuinely interested in gaining additional knowledge about discussed issues and who are willing to subject their opinions, their arguments under the critical judgment of other discutants. Because it's worth remembering that several years ago, the opinions and proposals of this group of citizens in majority of cases wouldn't go beyond the conversational circle of friends and family. So in this regard, we can say that development of online communication platforms create a new possibilities, the new development of the citizens' deliberation. We should of course take into our consideration the fact that the very specific of online communication platform, especially its consistence and evanescence, doesn't necessarily support the in-depth analysis of sometimes very complex issues of public life. But I believe that in many cases, active participation in online debates devoted to important public issues can be the first step to more formalize more active participation in the public life. And I would like to give you just one example from my hometown, from Łódź. In 2006, a group of active participants of online discussions devoted to the city decided to form GPO. It was an informal social movement of internet users which aim was to improve the quality of widely understood local public space. And in 2009, a part of group sympathizers decided to deepen and formalize the public activity by starting a non-governmental organization phenomenon which aims to promote the social, economic and cultural development of Łódź and the Łódź region. I think I will stop here because I would like to leave more time for the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Would you like to have our discussions right away, or would you prefer to do it at the end of the session? What do you think?
At the end.
At the end? Okay, please remember or write down all the questions or remarks you have and return the issues that are presented here. Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for your very interesting presentation. I have also some questions and remarks, and I will do that a little bit later. Right now, I would like to give the floor to Zuzanna Carmen Cismaș,